I'm Ezrah Raya, and this is the Manila Times. The National Maritime Council called China's recent brutal attack on Ayungin Shoal or Second Thomas Shoal a misunderstanding or accident. In an attempt to downplay the incident, Executive Secretary Lucas Bersamin said the council is not ready to classify it as an armed attack. On June 17, China Coast Guard and a Philippine resupply ship to BRP Sierra Madre had a heated encounter on Ayungin Shoal, which resulted in collision of inflatable boats. In this newest maritime clash, Chinese personnel repeatedly rammed and boarded two Philippine Navy inflatable boats, resulting in damage, seizure of equipment, as well as injuries to Filipino personnel, with one of them even losing a thumb in the encounter. It was noted that no guns but melee weapons were used to threaten, stab, and deflate Philippine boats. Here to share his insights is former Supreme Court Justice and a defender of the West Philippine Sea, Senior Justice Antonio Carpio. Welcome to the Manila Times, sir. Sir, the National Maritime Council says that the newest attack on Ayungin Shoal by China was not an armed attack, and they were calling it a misunderstanding or rather an accident.
Well, I agree it was not an armed attack because no firearms were used. And but I don't agree that it was not planned because you can see they were prepared. The Chinese were prepared. There were several dozens, several boats, and it cannot be a misunderstanding because that has been going on. Our resupply, every time we send a resupply, they always try to stop it. No, they always try to block our resupply. So there can be no misunderstanding. That's very clear, and it cannot be an accident because they were prepared. They carried the bladed weapons. That means they were prepared. So I agree it's not an armed attack because no firearms were used. That's why precisely they carried only bladed weapons because they didn't want us to invoke the treaty. Because if they carried weapons, there would be firing and we can invoke the treaty because it will be a armed attack. So they realize that, and we don't want also to use firearms because we don't want to escalate. So they knew that we will never use firearms because our Navy were instructed not to use firearms. So they carried bladed weapons, and they were so sure that we would not use our firearms.
Sir, for some people who have seen the videos of the newest attack on Ayungin Shoal, it was quite brutal and heated altercation between Chinese Coast Guard and the Philippine personnel. So as you have said, sir, about this attack, it was not armed. It was not armed. No guns were used. Only melee weapons were used to slash and stab, which was correct on your part. Now, since you mentioned the treaty, sir, maritime experts said to invoke or revisit the Mutual Defense Treaty and define the specific actions that would invoke the treaty. Do you agree with this, sir?
Well, the U.S. already said that if a Navy or Coast Guard personnel is killed, that would be a ground to invoke the treaty. But nobody was killed. No? So they may use water cannon or laser, or they may not use firearms. But if they use anything that's kinetic, anything other than firearms, but it causes death, it could result in the invocation of the treaty.
We draw the line at someone getting killed or death, ano?
Well,
And
that is the line drawn by the U.S., and we can only agree with that. So it's a message to China that although they carried the bladed weapons, they did not really hack anyone, no? Because they knew if they killed someone, we could invoke the treaty. They were aware of that, so they just used their bladed weapons to force us to follow their instruction, not to proceed. And they use that to destroy our inflatable boats, which is not did not result in death, no. So they were conscious. It was a planned thing because if they did not plan it, they would have used the bladed weapons. Somebody would have been killed. So they were given instructions. So to do acts that will fall just below an armed attack.
Sir, China also recently made a statement on being more assertive in the West Philippine Sea or South China Sea, as they call it, and they threatened to apprehend Filipino personnel. They stopped at that. So you're saying even China is very careful on how they act in the West Philippine Sea.
Yes, because we have a treaty with the US. They will do everything short of breaching the treaty or allowing us to invoke the treaty. That's why they call it gray zone tactics, so that it will not fall uh, in the definition of an armed attack.
Sir, in terms of how we should deal with this in the future, so the National Maritime Council are still sticking to constant and scheduled resupply missions to BRP Sierra Madre, the stationed resting ship out there, sir. So what do you think could be a more direct approach on this?
Well,
On
there are many ways to resupply, no? Airdrop, helicopter drop, or we can use ribs, rigid hulled inflatable boats, but with a very strong, powerful engine so that we can outrun them. Because the engines that they used were very slow. That's why naabutan sila. The Chinese caught up on them and surrounded the Philippine boat. No, that's why that fellow got his thumb cut because their boat was surrounded. In other words, they were overtaken. So it's a matter. It's a race, really. Once you resupply, you have to really outrun them. So. They did not probably plan it out thoroughly because this was an operation of the military and they did not involve the Navy. Uh, so the Navy had the Coast Guard. The Coast Guard has more experience there. So first, you have to use very fast boats. Second, you have to be prepared for Chinese to be using bladed weapons because that's what they did in the Himalayas, no, against the Indians.
You recommend evade and avoid, sir. But how do you plan regarding with this specific attack on Ayungin Shoal, wherein inflatable boats collided? So how do you think the Philippines should respond to this specific incident? Should we file another diplomatic protest, or do you think
Well,
something bigger?
the most that we can file is a diplomatic protest because we cannot bring this issue to an arbitral tribunal under UNCLOS because we already did that. And UNCLOS said it's a military activity. It's outside our jurisdiction because China made a reservation. So my proposal for the longest time is that we put up also a Coast Guard station, a lighthouse, and a Marine Research Center while we keep the Sierra Madre there. After we complete the lighthouse, the Coast Guard substation, the Marine Research Center, we can give up the uh, BFP Sierra Madre. But we have to establish our presence as a civilian facility so that if they stop us or they harass us, we can go to the tribunal. Of course, when we start bringing materials there, China will stop us. They will not even allow us to erect a structure there. So when they do that, we go to the tribunal and say, we are actually building a civilian structure. This is not a military activity anymore. So they will have jurisdiction. And we will have another award on top of the first award. And China, that's what China fears, that there will be award and the world will really support us because they want to follow the rule of law.
Sir, do you recommend that the Philippines would take another case to the High Tribunal, expecting China to stop harassments in the West Philippine Sea?
Not under the present situation because that is a military activity what we're doing now. We must first change the activity to civilian. And when China tries to stop us from doing that activity or building a civilian structure, that's the time we go to the tribunal, no, to the UNCLOS tribunal.
All right, sir. And sir, for your recommendations on the permanent structure, I remember you've mentioned that in one of our first interviews, a permanent civilian structure on the West Philippine Sea to replace and let go of the BRP Sierra Madre. Do you think that's at all possible and would not provoke any type of, we don't want to say war with China?
Well, under UNCLOS, we have the exclusive right to put up a structure on Ayungin Shoal because it's part of our exclusive economic zone. So if it is a right, if you exercise a right, you are not being provocative because you are doing it in accordance with law. It's like you're fishing in within the 10 dash line, but within our EEZ. That's not provocative because you have a right to fish. So it is only from China who is saying that it's provocative because it will be against their interests. But it's not provocative under the law because you're allowed to do that by the law itself.
And sir, how do you plan on, what is your suggestion on when Philippines has another encounter such as this? Because as what other people would describe it, it's quite brutal. And the Chinese Coast Guard were quite aggressive,
Well,
even just daily weapons.
we should continue the policy of no use of firearms, but our Navy personnel should be allowed to carry tear gas, stun guns, bladed weapons, just like the Chinese. So patas ang laban. Because if we don't have those bladed weapon or stun gun, our people, the Chinese can board us, can hack uh, our boat. But if we have the bladed weapon, they will be worried because we can also do the same to them. That's why they were able to do that because they were armed with bladed weapons while we were not.
I see, I see. So you were sticking to a peaceful encounter with the Chinese and the West
We must
Philippines.
follow the rule of law. Uh, we should not give them a reason to say that we fired on them. Uh, they are the first to use bladed weapons. We just follow it. So they cannot say that it's illegal because they are doing it themselves.
I see. Very well said, Senior Justice. Maraming salamat po. Supreme Court
Okay.
Justice and Defender of the West Philippine Sea, Justice Antonio Carpio. Thank you for your time, sir.
Thank you also. Bye.